Every holiday, my husband's parent forcefully seized control of our plans, declaring, "You'll celebrate with us or not at all." My husband let out a heavy sigh and advised, "Just go along with it." With a sly smile, I replied, "Sure, but first, let's watch this unforgettable video together." As the screen lit up, their expression transformed from self-assured smugness to unmitigated pure panic. For the first several years of our marriage, my in-laws ran every holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, even the 4th of July. Every time a holiday approached, I'd brace myself for the inevitable phone call from my mother-in-law, Carol. And of course, it always happened. Carol never bothered to ask about our plans. She didn't care. Instead, she dictated where we'd be, when we had to show up, and sometimes even what we should bring. It was always the same ultimatum: celebrate with us or not at all. Whenever I suggested any alternative, she acted as if I were crazy. Why change what's already been planned? She'd ask with a smile, as if it made sense. At first, I thought it was just a one-time thing. The second year, I realized it was a pattern. By the third year, I was frustrated, and by the fourth, I was downright furious. The worst part? My husband, Ethan, never backed me up. Every time I brought it up, he'd just sigh and say, "Just go along with it. It's not worth the fight. Not worth sacrificing family time, not worth feeling like a guest in my own life, and certainly not worth years of being treated as if my side of the family didn't matter." I played along for too long. But last Thanksgiving, I reached my breaking point and decided to take action. A few weeks before the holiday, Carol called me as usual. "I've planned the whole menu," she said cheerfully. "I know how much you love contributing a dish, so you can bring the rolls." I almost burst out laughing. She was giving me rolls, not even homemade, just store-bought, as if I were barely worth mentioning. Taking a deep breath, I said, "Actually, Ethan and I were thinking of celebrating Thanksgiving on our own this year." There was a brief silence, then Carol started laughing condescendingly. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be silly. You're coming here." I glanced at Ethan, hoping he'd support me, but he was already rubbing his temples and sighing as if this were all too exhausting. "Just go along with it, babe," he muttered. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I forced a smile and said sweetly, "Sure, but first, let's watch this video together." A week before Thanksgiving, I invited Carol and Greg, my father-in-law, over for dinner. They arrived with big smiles, assuming I'd given in. They sat expecting a pleasant evening, but then I turned on the TV. The screen lit up with a video montage I had been compiling for years. It started with simple clips, Carol being her usual overbearing self, snapping at me over how I made mashed potatoes, Greg mumbling that wives should be seen and not heard. Yes, he actually said that. Then it escalated. There was footage of Carol snooping in our bedroom last Christmas. Our security camera even caught her rifling through my jewelry box and opening my nightstand drawers. Greg was caught making racist remarks about my cousin at our Easter dinner, remarks he later denied ever making. Carol was recorded mocking Ethan behind his back, calling him spineless for letting me have an opinion. And the grand finale? A dashcam recording from the night before my wedding where Carol, completely unaware that my car recorded audio, was heard saying, "I'd give it 6 months, he'll divorce her and find a proper wife." A heavy silence fell. Carol's face drained of color, Greg's mouth dropped open, and Ethan looked like he'd just been struck. Carol was the first to break, stuttering, "Where did you get this?" I shrugged nonchalantly. "You know me, I'm always prepared." Ethan wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the words. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you show me this before?" I tilted my head and said, "Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer. Carol frantically tried to control the damage. "You're not going to do anything rash with that video, are you?" I leaned in, still smiling. "Of course not," I replied. "But Ethan and I are spending the holidays on our terms from now on. And if you try to guilt trip or threaten us or, heaven forbid, snoop through our stuff again, I might just share this with the entire family group chat." Carol's face twisted between rage and fear. Greg looked utterly defeated. They left without another word. Ethan sat silently for a long while before he finally exhaled. "Holy SH, he began. I shrugged and asked, "Now do you see why I was upset?" He nodded slowly. For the first time in our marriage, Ethan had stood up to his parents, and for the first time, I felt free. But this wasn't over. Carol wasn't the type to back down without a fight. That night, Carol and Greg left in silence, but I knew it wouldn't be the last word. I expected their calls to start the next morning, but nothing happened for a day, then 2, then 5. I began to think maybe they had finally accepted defeat. Maybe they'd realized they'd lost control. I should have known better. On the 6th day, Ethan's phone buzzed in the middle of the night, then again and again. At first, he ignored it, groggy and half asleep, but the buzzing wouldn't stop. A deep, sinking feeling crept into my stomach. I watched as Ethan sat up and grabbed his phone, his eyes adjusting to the brightness. The moment he saw what was on the screen, his face twisted. "What the hell?" he muttered. I sat up. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared, scrolling. I reached over and snatched the phone from his hand. The family group chat was on fire. Messages poured in from aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Did you see what Carol posted?" "OMG, Ethan. What's going on? Is this even true? You should be ashamed." Scrolling up, my blood ran cold. Pinned at the top of the chat was a lengthy, dramatic Facebook post from Carol, a masterpiece of manipulation. She started by saying, "Family means everything to me. I've always done my best to bring everyone together and make the holidays special." Then came the twist, "But sometimes people change. Sometimes they let the wrong influences in, and sometimes they become cruel." She went on to claim that Ethan had been brainwashed and controlled, that he'd turned against his own blood, and that she was devastated, heartbroken, and betrayed. She accused me of poisoning Ethan's mind, portraying herself as a master manipulator who'd been plotting all along. And then, as the final blow, she wrote, "A real mother never stops fighting for her child. I will always love my son, even if he's lost to me now, but I pray that one day he'll see the truth before it's too late." The comments flooded in with sympathy, and the shock was palpable. "I'm so sorry, Carol. You don't deserve this. Stay strong. He'll come back to you." Some people just want to tear families apart. The worst part was that some of Ethan's own relatives were all over it. Maybe not everyone, but enough. I scrolled through the comments in disgust and saw messages from Aunt Margaret, Cousin Josh, even his brother Ryan. His own brother. "You're really doing this? Cutting off your own parents over what they love you? You need to think about this." I clenched my fists. "She's flipping the script," I muttered, realizing she was now playing the victim. Ethan's face went pale, like he'd been hit in the gut. I don't understand," he whispered. I had seen Carol lose control with him in private, and now she was trying to do the same in public, and shockingly, it was working. I set Ethan's phone aside and grabbed mine. Over the years, I'd learned that in situations like these, silence was a weapon. If I started defending myself or wrote a long post explaining my side, it would only give credence to Carol's version. So, I said nothing. But Ethan couldn't ignore it. That morning, he called his mom, and she answered on the first ring, her voice full of fake tears. "Ethan. Sweetheart, I knew you'd come around. I knew you'd see how much you're hurting this family." Ethan took a shaky breath. "Mom, take the post down." There was silence, then a sharp little laugh. "Oh honey, why would I do that?" Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "That's a lie," he said, his voice strained as if he had just slapped her. "Ethan, I've done nothing but love you. And what do I get in return? Humiliation. Betrayal." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mom, you went through our bedroom. You called my wife controlling. You said you hoped I'd divorce her." Carol sniffled dramatically. "Oh, so she's feeding you lines now. I know how this works. First, she isolates you. Then she makes you doubt your own mother." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I saw the videos, Mom. My own eyes saw it." For a moment, Carol went quiet, then her tone shifted. The fake sobbing vanished and her voice turned cold. "Well, if that's how you feel," she said, voice clipped, "then I guess we'll see you at Christmas, or not at all." And with that, she hung up. Ethan stared at the phone as if it had grown teeth, then he exhaled. Holy, I crossed my arms. "Now, do you see what I've been dealing with?" He nodded slowly. For the first time, I saw real anger in his eyes, not frustration or helplessness, but pure anger. "She's not getting away with this," he muttered. And for the first time in our marriage, I believed him. After Carol's dramatic post, Ethan's phone exploded. Messages poured in, family members demanding explanations, some defending his mom, others just looking for drama. At first, Ethan tried to explain, "This isn't what you think. You don't know the full story. There are things you haven't seen. Mom isn't the victim here." But it didn't matter. People were eager to believe the lie. And the worst part? Carol knew it. She had spent years crafting her image as the perfect mother, the devoted matriarch who only wanted the best for her son. Now she was doubling down. A few days later, Ethan's brother Ryan called. "Look, man," Ryan said, voice tight. "I don't know what's going on, but Mom's a mess. She hasn't eaten in days, cries all the time, and says you won't even talk to her." Ethan rubbed his face. "Ryan, she's playing you. She's fine, you don't know that." Ryan shot back. "She's lost weight. She's not sleeping. Dad says she just sits in the dark waiting for you to come to your senses." I almost left Carol. She's being overly dramatic. Ethan wasn't convinced either. If she's suffering that much, why is she still posting on Facebook? Ryan hesitated. "She's just trying to explain her side." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "Her side is a bunch of lies. Did she tell you she went through our bedroom? That she called my wife controlling? That she said she hoped I'd get divorced?" Ryan went quiet. "Then no, of course not, because Carol only tells the version that makes her look good. She's your mother, Ethan." Finally, Ryan asked, "Are you really going to throw her away over this?" Ethan's face hardened. "I'm not throwing her away," he said, "but she's giving me an ultimatum, her way or nothing." Ryan sighed and muttered, "Think about it, man," then hung up. Ethan stared at his phone, then slowly turned to me. "I think she's planning something." I crossed my arms. She always is. But neither of us was ready for what happened next. A week later, Ethan was at work when someone knocked on our door. I was home alone. I checked the peephole and my stomach dropped. It was the police. For a split second, I panicked. Had something happened to Ethan? An accident? Was he hurt? I yanked the door open. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "we got a call about a possible domestic disturbance at this residence." I blinked. "What?" The second officer glanced at his notes. The caller reported concerns about a woman in distress, possible emotional abuse. My blood went ice cold. Carol, it had to be Carol. I forced myself to stay calm. I think there's been a mistake. The officers exchanged looks. We still have to check, one of them said. Would you mind stepping outside? I did. One officer stayed with me while the other peeked inside. Is your husband home? No, I said tightly. Are you okay? I let out a humorless laugh. I'm perfectly fine. The officer gave me a long look then nodded. All right, sorry for the trouble. We'll have to follow up. They left, and the moment the door shut, I grabbed my phone. I called Ethan. On the second ring, he answered. I said, your mother just sent the cops to our house. There was silence, then, very quietly, Ethan said, tell me everything. Ethan was furious, not just annoyed, but downright furious. He had been trying to keep things peaceful, to maintain some kind of relationship with his mom despite everything. But this was war. That night, Ethan called his mom. She didn't answer, so he texted her, did you call the police on my wife? Read at 9:42 p.m. No response. He waited an hour, then called again. This time, she picked up. Oh, sweetheart, she sighed, I was just about to call you. Did you send the cops to our house? Ethan cut in, silent for a moment, then she gasped, oh my God, is that what they told you? No, honey, I would never do that, but I did mention to a friend that I was worried about you, and maybe she called. I had no idea. Ethan hung up. No yelling, no arguing, just hung up. Then he turned to me. She's done for. For the first time, he blocked her number, blocked her on Facebook, and told his family everything. Carol tried every trick in the book to win him back, calling from different numbers, having Greg text, saying his mother was worried sick. Even Ryan sent a long message, she's still your mom, man. But Ethan didn't budge. Then Carol did the one thing she had left. She showed up at Ethan's office in tears. Security had to escort her out. That night, she left him a voicemail. Through sobs, she whispered, I hope you're happy, Ethan. You broke your mother's heart. I don't even know if I'll be around next Christmas. I just hope you can live with yourself. When Ethan played that recording for me, I waited for him to show some reaction, a sigh or a guilty look, but instead, he just shook his head and muttered, she's never going to stop. I put my hand on his. So, what do we do now? Ethan paused, then looked up at me. And then he said something I never thought I'd hear, we end this. Carol had made her move, lying, manipulating, turning our family against us. She even sent the police to my door, and when that didn't work, she showed up at Ethan's office. It was clear she wasn't going to back down unless we took a stand. So Ethan made a choice. He called for a family meeting. It was time to end it once and for all. Ethan sent a message to our family group chat, we need to talk. No more side conversations, no more rumors. This ends now. Meet at our house this Saturday. Carol saw it. She didn't reply, but I knew she'd be there. She never missed a chance to twist things in her favor. By Saturday, the tension in our house was palpable. Ethan barely spoke that morning. I could see the dread on his face, but underneath it, there was a spark of determination. He was done being controlled. Exactly at 3 p.m., they arrived, Carol, Greg, Ryan, a few cousins, some aunts, and aunts we barely knew. Carol walked in last, like a queen entering her throne room. Her eyes swept the room, and a tight smile played on her lips. She looked confident, as if she still believed she could win. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost no one sat down. The room was too charged, too tense. Ethan stood in the middle, arms crossed. Carol sighed dramatically. Ethan, honey, is all this really necessary? This family has been through enough. Ethan's jaw clenched. Yeah, Mom, it is. She placed a hand over her chest. I just want to fix things. I've been so worried. I haven't eaten. I haven't slept. Ethan cut her off. Then why did you send the police to our house? The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Carol. She blinked, her lips parting in feigned surprise. What police, Ethan? I would never stop lying. Ethan's voice sharpened. Carol flinched for the first time, looking nervous. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Ryan cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact. But Ethan wasn't done. I didn't want to do this, he said, pulling out his phone. I really didn't, but you forced my hand. He pressed play and Carol's voicemail filled the room. I hope you're happy, Ethan. You broke your mother's heart. I don't even know if I'll be here next Christmas. I just hope you can live with yourself. Her voice dripped with manipulation. The silence after the recording was deafening. Then Ethan looked up, and his next words shattered everything. This is emotional abuse. Carol's mouth fell open as she glanced around, searching for support. But no one spoke, even Ryan was silent. I've spent my whole life trying to make you happy, Ethan continued, his voice trembling, but it's never enough, is it? You always want more control, more attention, more power over me. And when you lose even a little bit, you lash out. You spread lies, attack my wife, and turn our family against me. Carol shook her head quickly. That's not true. That's not true, Ethan. Honey, you're confused. Ethan stepped closer. You told my wife you'd divorce her before we were even married. There were a few gasps. Carol's face turned red. I didn't mean you went through our bedroom. You insulted my wife. You lied to this entire family about what happened. Ethan turned to Greg. Dad, you've been quiet. Do you want to defend her? Greg shifted uncomfortably. I mean, your mother only meant well. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Of course she did. Then he addressed the group. This is the truth. You've all seen it now. You can either believe it or keep pretending, but either way. He met Carol's eyes. We're done. Carol's face twisted with pure rage. You can't just we can, and we are. Ryan stepped forward. Ethan, come on, she's still your mom. Ethan shook his head. No, Ryan, she's my abuser. And just like that, it was over. Carol's whole body shook. You can't do this to me, I am your mother. Ethan didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned toward the door. Get out, Carol. For a split second, Carol hesitated. I saw a flicker in her eyes, not sadness, but fear. She knew she had lost. With a shaky breath, she turned and left. Greg followed, then Ryan, and then everyone else. No goodbyes, no apologies, just silence. When the door finally clicked shut, Ethan exhaled a long, slow breath. His shoulders slumped, his hands trembling. I reached for him, and for the first time in years, he felt free. For weeks, Carol kept trying. She sent messages, begging, pleading, threatening, but Ethan never answered. When Christmas came, she sent a long, dramatic email. I never thought my own son would abandon me on the holidays. I hope your new family is worth it. Ethan read it, and without a word, he deleted it. That Christmas, we spent the day alone for the first time. There was no pressure, no guilt, no walking on eggshells. We made hot cocoa, watched old movies, and laughed. And for the first time in years, the holidays felt like ours, not Carol's, not Greg's, but ours. And that, in the end, was the best revenge of all. In the weeks following that fateful day, the tension in our home gradually softened into a cautious hope. Ethan began to rebuild the pieces of his life that had been shattered by years of control and manipulation. Our family, once fractured by secrets and lies, started gathering for honest conversations, no more hidden messages or whispered schemes. Instead, we shared meals, opened up about our own vulnerabilities, and slowly learned what it meant to truly support one another. Greg, who had always felt torn between his mother and his son, finally found the courage to speak his truth. One quiet evening, he sat down with Ethan in the living room. Dad, he said softly, I never realized how deep this ran until today. I'm sorry it took so long, but I want to help your family. His words were a balm, and Ethan's guarded eyes softened into a small, grateful smile. Meanwhile, Ryan reached out to Carol. Although the wounds were still fresh, he wanted to understand why she had spiraled so far. Their conversation wasn't full of immediate forgiveness, but it planted a seed of accountability. Carol, faced with the reality of her actions and the impact on those she once claimed to love, began to acknowledge her role in the turmoil. Over time, she made tentative steps toward making amends, attending therapy, and seeking ways to reconcile her past, even if reconciliation wasn't guaranteed. As the months passed, our family found strength in its newfound honesty. Christmas came around the following year, and this time it felt different, not lonely or heavy, but warm with the promise of renewal. We gathered not out of obligation or fear, but out of love and a shared desire for genuine connection. Hot cocoa, laughter, and old movies brought us together as we embraced both our scars and our progress. Ethan looked around the room at familiar faces, each bearing its own story of hurt and healing. He realized that while the past could never be completely erased, the future was theirs to shape. For the first time in many years, he felt truly free, not because Carol was gone, but because he had reclaimed his voice and built a family that believed in truth, support, and forgiveness. In that moment, amid the quiet joy of a hard-won peace, we all understood that our journey wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about learning to love ourselves and each other enough to create a future where our past no longer held us hostage. And that was the resolution we had been searching for all along.